Yeah, so I guess we'll get started. My name's Natalie, and I'm with the Tennessee Local Food Summit. We're really excited to be offering this session. It's clearly really important. And I can say that as someone who works in the local food system for a farm, all that we want is to ensure that the food that we grow gets to our community. And it's really unfortunate that so many people are unable to access local food, and that local food is out of reach for so many people for various reasons. So really excited to talk more about this and to get to separate out into breakout rooms later. So with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator. Jeannie Hunter is the director of the Society of St. Andrew. And I'm going to have to admit that I printed the bio and it's in my printer over there. So I'm actually not going to run get it. So I'll let Jeannie finish introducing herself. But I know that she is a mother and she loves to knit and garden. And she's also leading our book club that is sort of a collaboration with the Food Summit, the Society of St. Andrew, and Slow Food Middle Tennessee, where we are reading books relevant to this topic today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeannie.
All right. Thank you so much. As Natalie mentioned, I work for the Society of St. Andrew. It's a nonprofit organization. We glean food at farms and farmers markets and other places, anywhere we can get it, and deliver it to agencies that feed hungry people. So in that setting, I'm seeing both food waste and the environmental issues that are connected with that, but also hunger and all of the issues around food insecurity that our neighbors in Tennessee are suffering. And so it's my pleasure to bring these folks together tonight to talk about hunger and food justice. And thank you, all of you, for being here tonight. I appreciate it. Our 5 experts tonight are varied from academia to hands in the dirt, and we're glad to have all of these different experiences here. We're going to start tonight with Dr. David Schlundt. He's a psychology professor at Vanderbilt University. He directs the qualitative research core at Vanderbilt's Institute of Medicine and Public Health, and he leads the community engagement core of the Center of Diabetes Translation Research. He has extensive knowledge, of food deserts, and he's going to start us off tonight.
So I'm going to talk about food deserts, and I'm going to kind of take you through my evolution in terms of understanding food deserts and some of the work that I've done with food deserts to really try to understand them and sort of the context in which I was working at the time. So I'm going to talk about what is a food desert. I'm going to take you through the process of mapping the food deserts in Nashville that we did back for the Communities Putting Prevention to Work project. And then I'll go on to some work I did with mapping food deserts statewide in Tennessee. And then we'll end up talking a little bit about some of the complexities of food deserts and really trying to understand what we can do, what they are, and what some of the possibilities are for making changes. So to begin with, a food desert, I think, has 3 characteristics. There's limited access to healthy food choices. There are transportation barriers for the people living there. And there is a high level of poverty and health disparities. And so if you actually look at a map of Nashville and identify neighborhoods without grocery stores, you will discover that Forest Hills has no grocery stores. But I would not call Forest Hills a food desert. My joke is, if you run out of food in Forest Hills, you send the maid out in the Mercedes to get some. So that's why it's these issues. It's also the issue of transportation and poverty that makes up what a food desert is. So back during the Economic Recovery Act. Nashville Health Department got a grant called putting communities putting prevention to work. I'll get it out. And one of the things they were taking on, they called it the corner store initiatives. And what they wanted to do is put refrigerators in corner stores in the food desert neighborhoods that would be able to have fresh produce to allow sort of people to sell healthier foods. And so one of the first steps was, well, we need to figure out where the food deserts are. And so I used a geographic information system, and I'm going to take you through some of the steps to try to understand where in Nashville we should consider the food deserts to be. So I started out with residential parcels. So I got a map that showed where each house or apartment was located. I identified major grocery stores. I got a layer that had the bus stops. So I calculated how far you are from a grocery store, how far you are from the nearest bus stop. I got census data and health data and put that over and added it all together. I took it all the way down to the census block group, which is a pretty fine resolution. I had a lot of measures. Green was the grocery stores. I gave that extra weight. Yellow was transportation. The blue-green represents what you might call social determinants of health. And then the pink were some of the health outcomes and health disparities in Nashville. Here's the map of Nashville showing the food deserts. If you look carefully, you can see the little gray circles on the map. Those are major grocery stores with a 1 mile radius around them. You can see the sort of main highways there. And then the areas are color coded from the sort of light tan to the darker red. The darker it is, the more it represents a food desert. So I basically took all of that information, added it together, threw it up on the map. And the red areas are areas that have less access to food, problems with transportation, high sort of negative social determinants of health, and health impacts and health disparities. Here I'll zoom in. We identified 4 neighborhoods that were food deserts. North Nashville, which actually bleeds over into West Nashville. East Nashville, which is includes that strip along Dickerson Pike, between Dickerson Pike and Briley Parkway. Edge Hill, which had long been discussed as a Nashville food desert. And then South Nashville, that were 2 residential neighborhoods on the east side of Interstate 65. They were really all older neighborhoods close to downtown. Here's a zoom in on the North Nashville food desert. The little green dots represent the corner stores where we were interested in maybe coming in and putting some extra resources. You can, if you look over there on the right edge, you can see the one grocery store at that time, which was the Monroe Street Kroger. Since then, there's now a Save-A-Lot out there on Clarksville Pike. But you see, you have to go all the way out Charlotte past White Bridge Road before you get to a grocery store on the west side. This is the Edge Hill on the left and the South Nashville on the right. You can see there's some corner stores. There's really no grocery store anywhere close to that South Nashville one. And then the closest grocery store to Edge Hill is what is now the Kroger on 21st Avenue, heading out of Hillsborough Village. This is the East Nashville. This was the biggest surprise to everybody. They kind of knew that lower corner around Casey Homes was a food desert, but nobody was really talking about this triangle that goes from Main Street up to Trinity Lane with basically Dickerson Pike on one side and Briley Parkway on the other. So you see, you have to cross that major barrier of Ellington Parkway, excuse me, till you get to the grocery stores on Gallatin Road, or you've got to go north of Trinity Lane on Dickerson till you get to a grocery store. So four food deserts, healthy foods, transportation, social determinants of health, health disparities. When I presented this at the health department, the director said, well, I'm really curious, what's the racial and ethnic composition of these food deserts? And I went back and I added it all up. And 85% of the residents in these four areas are African American. And I've been struck that you could not find a better example of institutional racism than that. Nobody sort of sat down at some point in planning Nashville, said, well, we're not going to put any grocery stores in the Black neighborhoods. But as we transitioned from small stores to the major grocery chains, and they came in and chose their locations, they chose not to go into the Black neighborhoods. So it created this really injustice of a lack of access to healthy foods, affordable foods. Now, I will say today, if I redo these maps with today's data, everything would start looking different, because we are undergoing such a rapid gentrification process in many of these neighborhoods. But I think there are still many poor areas that are really only served by convenience stores, particularly if you don't have access to reliable transportation. I was playing around and used the Tennessee White Pages and accessed all of the listings for food stores and geocoded them and threw them up on a map. And in looking at this, I saw a couple things. One is that food is along major highways and in towns, and that once you get out of the metropolitan area, there really are very large geographic areas that aren't served by food stores. So if you live out in Dixon County or Hickman County, you may have to go 25, 30 miles to get to a full service grocery store. So I was working with the Tennessee Obesity Task Force and went through a similar process. I didn't have the same fine resolution, but I used census data. I used the economic census, which gave me at least the density of restaurants and fast foods and grocery stores, some data from the behavioral risk factor system, and some of the mortality data. This one was combining poverty, social distress, transportation, density of food sources, stores and restaurants. The redder it is, the more of a food desert it is. And immediately it started to jump out to me that you've got your major metropolitan areas that are resourced, and then you've got these rural areas in between that are not resourced well. When I added in the morbidity and mortality, it became a really stark contrast. So you can see that West Tennessee, with the exception of, let's say, Jackson and Memphis, is what really characterized by what poverty, poor transportation, poor health, and lack of good access to food. So we were really, really excited about this. And finally got a meeting with John Dreisner, who was the health commissioner at the time. And I was like explaining the methods, and I'm showing the maps, and I'm like, this is so exciting. We really, really need to be paying attention to these rural counties. We need to get groceries. He goes, whoa, wait a minute. We believe in personal responsibility. You should eat healthy and exercise no matter where you live. It was like, well, that's okay, interesting. And so I say this to really contrast that when you actually go out there and deal with politicians and deal with decision makers, you're going to find this sort of personal responsibility theme. Once the task force was over, they took it over. They took all of our work to improve the environment and converted it into a social marketing campaign to simply convince people to be more responsible for eating well. I really see healthy eating now as a person-environment interaction, and that where you live and where you work and how you travel determines the food resources that are available to you. And that's limited greatly by your income. So some of the complexities, the companies will locate stores where they think they'll be profitable. The locations are constrained by zoning. That's why if you look at the map, grocery stores are along major transportation routes that are commercial areas. Without incentives, companies will build stores in more affluent areas because they think they'll make more money that way. There's also a lot of research out there that just building a store may not immediately transform people into healthy eaters. That there's both a supply and a demand element to it that makes it a little bit more complex than just, say, plopping a grocery store down in Edgefield. So there really needs to be thought about other approaches to increasing demand for healthy foods. And I think that affordability is a really, really important part of this as well. So I just want to say food deserts are not just urban neighborhoods. They're really out there in the rural areas. This is what happens when you let companies just locate their stores where they think they'll make the most money. So I think we need public policy approaches to bring stores to both poor urban neighborhoods and to the rural communities. A personal responsibility alone is not an effective approach. It's really going to need a policy response to improve access to low-income rural and minority populations in the urban areas. So I thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for starting us out. And I realized while you were speaking, I was supposed to introduce everybody and then ask you all which breakout group you would like to get into once we get to that point. So let me get there. Obviously, this is where we are. And our first panelist, thank you again, Dr. Schlundt. Our next panelist will be David Padgett, who does a lot of the same kind of research at TSU. And then we'll have Shae Austin Cantu, also out of TSU, out of the SNAP education program. We'll have Nella Frierson and Marie Campbell and Anna Carella from the Brooklyn Heights Community Garden. And then we'll have Everett Davis, who's the sustainability coordinator at Music City Center. And after everybody, all the panelists have spoken and we've had a little bit of a conversation, we will get into small groups. And I hope that you will please write in the chat which small group you would like to be most involved in. And that way, when the time comes, Natalie and I can put you in the group that you are hoping to network with and discuss with. So take a few minutes and do that.
I just want to add that if you don't write in the chat which one you want to be in, then you'll just get put into one automatically.
Great. So I'm going to copy this list into the chat so that we can keep going without having to share my screen. So next up is Dr. Padgett.
Okay, good evening. I'm just going to take a kind of a chronological journey through my experience dealing with food deserts in Nashville specifically. So in around 2003, there was a coalition called Tying Nashville Together. They were essentially a non-denominational organization of religious groups. And they were conducting a store quality survey at the time. So they were going to stores around Nashville. They had a checklist and they were trying to determine whether there were certain stores in certain communities that were serving people or really were underserving people. They had a score that each store received from, I think, 0 to 100, very similar to the health department scores, but it was based upon, it was expanded beyond what the health department would gather. It included service, attitudes towards customers and so on and so forth. And so Tying Nashville Together, TNT, approached me at about 2003 and asked me to map their data over top of various demographic and socioeconomic layers, and found out, as you would expect, that the lower quality, lower performing stores were in low income and predominantly African-American communities. And so that's where the first food desert maps of Nashville came from, that work in 2003 with Tying Nashville Together. We found some really just gross inequity. There were stores that literally had items on the shelves 5 and 6 years, not months, 5 and 6 years past the expiration date. And in many cases, communities such as Napier Homes and areas of Edge Hill had large numbers of people who did not have private vehicles. And so they were what I call captive food populations. They couldn't go shopping anywhere else easily except for these very low quality stores in their neighborhoods. And so they were treated like people who had no place else to go. We exposed that. In fact, a couple of the news agencies, after our presentation of the first maps, actually went into the stores, and these people were pulling the expired products off the shelves. And so Tying Nashville Together put some of those stores on notice that that kind of treatment would not be tolerated. And it also exposed some of the issues with public transit as not being an option to go to the store. I think there was a small group that did a study that showed that it would take 3 hours round trip on any bus just to get to a grocery store and back. That's without shopping. That's just getting to the store and back. And so transit inequity is a big issue. Beginning in around 2004 to 2007, I was involved a lot with food security partners. And one of the issues that came to light out of that involvement with food security partners is the issue of gentrification. And so Edge Hill during that time lost their last grocery store. And we spoke to people from food retailers in order to try to get them to place a store in Edge Hill. But retailers hate gentrifying communities because essentially the fear is that they're going to lose half the market. If you put a grocery store in a gentrifying neighborhood and it becomes known as the Black grocery store, white patrons aren't going to shop there. If you put a grocery store in a gentrifying neighborhood and it's predominantly patronized by whites, Black people aren't going to shop there. You're going to lose half the market. So there's no way that you're going to put a store in a neighborhood that's in transition. And this played out in real life in East Nashville. Around that same time, Walmart planned to put a neighborhood Walmart over in East Nashville. It was very controversial because the new coming predominantly white gentrifiers had problems with Walmart. Oh, they're exploiting Chinese people over in China. Oh, they're bad. Walmart pays their workers. Whereas African Americans were like, we don't have any problem with China. We need a store here. We need jobs here. We need food here. Y'all can worry about China if you want to. We want this Walmart there. And Walmart made a compromise. And guess what? That store didn't last 5 years. It's gone. And so that East Nashville Walmart kind of played out the scenario of some of the differences we have in terms of racial politics when it comes to food deserts. I've been involved in some food desert mitigation efforts. One was with Harry Medical College. The principal investigator for the Reach 2020 project was the late Dr. Margaret Hargreaves. And with that project, the mitigation measure was to bring food to the people. We set up mobile markets at mostly faith-based institutions throughout North Nashville. It was a learning experience. One thing that we learned is that it's very difficult to bring food to people because the food business is a very narrow profit margin business. And so even though some of our vendors were subsidized to the tune of $10,000 each, the instant they lost money, they were out, And so anytime we try to expand food service, that puts a strain on people who are in that business, even if they're well-meaning and they can't feed themselves. If they can't feed themselves, they're not going to be around very long. Another solution during the Megan Barry era was literally, we were going to bring an organization called Uplift Solutions into Nashville. Uplift Solutions is based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And what they do is build supermarkets in food deserts all over the country. And that's my alarm. And so they're very successful because they actually engage the community prior to building the store. They take a year of I guess, focus groups and interviews. And by the time the store is built, the store has the products that people want. And a secondary part of the educational process is health. You know, we don't want to put a grocery store in a neighborhood so people can eat even more fried chicken, or they can eat even more processed foods, or they can eat even more of whatever it is that's making them sick and obese. So part of that educational process is saying, hey, have you tried rotisserie chicken? No, here's some. Oh, this tastes great. I've never even thought about having rotisserie chicken or baked fish instead of fried fish. What's over here? Fruits and vegetables. Maybe there are some ways that we can get our kids to really like grapes and apples instead of pop, whatever those crunchy snacks are that ruin our kids' teeth and health altogether. Unfortunately, I mean, we literally had a contract for Uplift Solutions to come to Nashville on the table, and then, you know, things happened. I won't go into it, the Berry administration. And then last but certainly not least, a couple other victories was the Save-A-Lot stores. The Save-A-Lot stores were notoriously bad. And the movement in Nashville brought Save-A-Lot's corporate office to Nashville. And at that time, all the Save-A-Lots were franchises. And if you're a franchisor, you don't care about people in the community. You're just trying to make money. Save-A-Lot closed every single franchise. And now the Save-A-Lots we see here now are all corporate. And I was skeptical. I thought, yeah, you're going to look good for a couple of years. And then next thing you know, it's going to be the same old. But for the most part, and I used to live right down the street from that Save-A-Lot on Clarksville Highway. It's still, I mean, it's not perfect, but it is what it is in terms of serving those communities. And the last solution that I was involved with is something called the Agri-Hood. This is practiced in Detroit and practiced in Milwaukee and practiced in Atlanta, where you take vacant space in cities and use those vacant spaces to grow food. And in places like Detroit, Milwaukee, and Atlanta, there is so much vacant land that you're actually able to sustain urban markets and farmers markets by growing food in cities on vacant land. And this can easily be done by taking advantage of a lot of the open space and property that's all over our city. And we showed that in North Nashville, there's plenty of vacant land that could easily sustain several farmers markets. And then we thought about getting greenhouses and hydroponics, getting young kids involved in hydroponics and growing food indoors so we could have a year-round supply of food to these urban markets. So hope I haven't taken up too much time, but I just thought I'd just walk you all through that, my journey through food deserts and race and justice in Nashville over the last 20 years.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Shae Austin Cantu. Some hunger relief comes from state and federal levels. And in fact, for every one person who gets their food at a food bank or food pantry, there are 9 people who are getting federal aid through SNAP benefits. And besides receiving that financial aid, there are educational resources to help people use that money to the best, most efficient, and most healthful ways. And Shae is the director of the SNAP education program at Tennessee State University, their extension offices, and she's going to tell you about that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here. We're very happy to be a part of this meeting tonight, and we're looking forward to the breakout session and all the questions you might have. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that's very important to me. And I wanted to start with cooperative extension. I've worked with Cooperative Extension for 16 years, and I think it's one of the best kept secrets out there. Cooperative Extension, if you don't know, is in all 50 states and 5 territories of America. And Tennessee is served by an 1862, which is the University of Tennessee, but I work proudly for the 1890s land grant institution, which is Tennessee State University. And I'm blue to the core. I love Tennessee State. And one of the things that we do is we serve on the ground. We bring back the research of the universities back to the people. We believe that's very important because the people support the universities with their tax money. And we want to serve the communities, and we believe in making sure that everyone has access to information that they can solve their own local problems with. Now, one of those is, of course, that we all need to eat every day. And so we teach people how to shop, cook, and eat within their budget. And we do so because we want to look at food resource management. Now, when we talk about food swamps, when we talk about food deserts, when we talk about justice and social justice issues around who gets access to healthy food, we also need to remember that there's also some issues around being able to manage money or having access to money or to be able to make money. And so when you look in the literature, there's very little to none as far as information regarding studies on food resource management as it is to consumer and spend their money. And so one of the things that we find is that people don't know how to shop and cook and eat within their budget. And so it's something that we do every day, and it's very important to us to help people find healthy solutions that can feed their family on a very limited means. And so these are of course, all the counties in Tennessee. We're in 8 with our programs. 7 of them are SNAP education, and 1 county up here, this is Stewart County, a very rural county, Dover, Tennessee. We have an FNAP program there, as well as in Davidson and in Tipton. And what we do in these counties, if you look, 1 out of 6 households there are a SNAP household. And this is representing 40.3% of the population in the state. And 6 out of 10 of the people or the children in these counties receive free or reduced lunch. And so you can see that in the counties we're in, it's higher than the state average in almost every indicator that we look at. And so what we do on the ground is very, very important. And so teaching people to shop. Here are some of our educators in grocery stores with youth. We do tours and help people learn how to do unit pricing, how to feed a family of 4 for under $10 in one meal, kind of trying to show the people how to use a grocery store, because now anymore in schools, because Tennessee removed what I used to love to call home economics, but is now called family and consumer sciences, they've removed that from most of our schools. And so how do you learn to shop and to effectively plan meals for a family? The other is cook. And here we do a lot of face-to-face classes. Most of the time, our classes are a series of 6 to 10 classes, running about an hour to an hour and a half apiece. And we include a food demonstration and teach people how to cook. And so here you see us doing some of that. And since the pandemic, we've gone virtual. And so we're doing a lot of this over Zoom and Facebook and some other ways that we're reaching people still during this time. And then eat. There's a lot to eating, not just being able to prepare food, but being able to prepare food safely. We're much more aware of washing our hands and food safety now that the pandemic has happened. But how often do we think about who has access to a refrigerator, whose utilities stay on, who has the opportunity, now that we've all had the opportunity to see what it's like to see shelves empty of needed things, who has the opportunity to get these things when Lysol ends up being, what, $10, $12 a can. So those kinds of things impact our families. And so this is some of the recipes and posts that we do on our social media, and helping people to have simple meals. It's easy to prepare, especially if you don't have a fully stocked kitchen, not only in food, but also in pans and knives and other things that you need. So it's important to know that running a crock pot is 2 cents an hour versus a stove, which is 45 cents an hour. It's important to know that you can, there are places where when I used to go in, and my mama sold Tupperware. So when I started working SNAP education, I would have SNAP parties. And so I would go into people's homes and I'd say, if you invite 4 or 5 friends, we'll have a SNAP party. And really I was just giving a lesson and a food demonstration, but it was a lot of fun. But I had to bring everything there with me. And if I forgot something, often they would have to run 2 houses down or go to a neighbor to find a knife or to find a skillet. So see, there's disparity that's beyond food. And if there is a food disparity, there's other disparities there. And so a lot of times what frustrates me is that people try to solve these issues using their resources instead of stepping into the real environment, the lived environment of everyday people who are suffering some of these crises. And that's not just those other people. That's all of us. At any point, we can deal with some major crisis. This pandemic has certainly shown us that there are times in life when we all need a little bit of help. And so we try very hard to keep recipes and tips and all this information front and center with our social media. Here is a bus ad that we had running in Davidson County, just to kind of give you an idea of some of our outreach with this. Here are extension educators in action. You will see that C of TSU blue. We're very proud of that. And this is kind of some of the activities that they do. Now, graduates, once they complete our series, they graduate. You don't know how many folks have never graduated from something and how often they'll become cheerful or their families will come because they're graduating our classes. And it's very important. So this is some of our graduates. Very proud of that. And then there's impact, right? There's all kinds of impact. We have impact that gets noticed in the newspaper and some of our educators and their different programs. But then there's this kind of impact that says, I used to eat peas, but now I'm eating a variety of vegetables. That's our favorite kind. And this one, when I come home, I used to watch TV, but now I go on the trampoline. That's her teacher, by the way. That's our educator, Miss Sharon. And so then there's the pre and the post. We're required by our grant to do a pre and a post survey. And what we find on outcomes is that 68.2 last year increased their fruit, 80.5 increased vegetables, 47.9 reduced sugary beverages. And I want to tell you how hard that is. Okay, that's a hard one to move. And then 89.5 increased water. Now, on our food resource management, because see, that's our emphasis at Tennessee State University, is helping stretch that food dollar so that people don't have food insecurity. 80% improved their shopping because they compared prices, and 62.7% increased grocery list use. But this is my favorite one because see, I grew up in a home where we bathed in a creek. Sometimes our utilities were off. Often there was food insecurity. At one point or another, we were homeless. So 65% of the people who go through our classes report that they have improved not only their shopping, but that they do not run out of food during the month. And to me, that's the most important thing that we do. Now, PSE, I've heard you guys talking about it. And what it is making the healthy choice the easy choice. We don't just look at individual behavior, we look at the community. We're extension and we help, and we've been in the community 100 years and we hope to be there 100 or 200 or 500 more. And so this is what we do. You will see some of our impact. We put in water fountains. This is Stewart County. And now this is very important in the pandemic. Did you know that the children cannot use the water fountains now? So if they don't have a fountain like this, and we've been giving out water bottles as well, then they can't have water when they're at school. They have to have an individual, non-shared source to drink. This is a Coca-Cola machine that we got along with Coordinated School Health to turn into completely water. And this is a lunchroom that went ahead and decorated in all fruits and vegetables. This is a community garden that we helped plan in Hamilton County outside the Senior Citizens Home. And now there are 6 of these beds as of this year. And then what does that mean for food justice? These are some of the barriers of participation that we used to know, right? None of this is new. This is actually an old study. But there's also the idea that this is what we're trying to do for people, is help them to have the things that they need. But I would say that the pandemic has taught us that Maslow has to be changed. The underscore in everything in today's society is the need for Wi-Fi. And if you need Wi-Fi, you need utilities. So then you need those things before you can have food, but you need food to live. So what do you do first? And so it's the tyranny of the moment. There's stages of change. If you've ever tried to quit smoking, lose weight, gain weight, do anything different, you've done this. And so you can see that there's a lot there that has to go on. And that's if you are a rational person with no pressure, no stress, everything's going okay, and you have everything you need. Because the truth of the matter is that those who least need to change are those who are most able to. And often those who don't need to change sit in judgment of those who do. And so it's really important to remember that if people are running around, and it's easy to see now with their hair on fire, then that we need to be respite and water and help them to find ways by changing the environment to make it better and easier for people to access food that they need, and also other things. I only put this in because a lot of times we talk about people planning, but this is Satter's hierarchy of food needs. If you notice, a lot of the people we serve are down here in the 1 or the 2, where if you've ever been hungry, you don't care what you get as long as you get fed, right? In the South, we call that a belly filler. And I often tell my staff that you cannot tell these mothers that they're not doing well. Because if that child went to bed and they weren't hungry, she's a good mom. And that's the truth. It's only until you get to the middle that you start to plan, if you look and see. And so we're trying to move people up this. But if we start with planning and you're really in crisis, you really can't plan. You're just not in a mental space where you can't. We really need to think about that. The last thing is that if this is our audience, who is the poor in America? Who are we thinking of? And I think this is a real mistake sometimes, that we think it's somebody else. Who else could it be? What does it look like to be low income? Is someone's only identity their income? And then there's the myopic viewpoint. Myopic viewpoint is that poverty often is like the blind man trying to describe the elephant. It just depends on what part of the animal you got a hold of that is your understanding of poverty. But the truth is that even though I've lived it and I know a lot about it, I can't tell you everything there is to know about poverty, because there's just so much to know. And the fact of the matter is that these are the poverty guidelines. They're updated every January 15th. And our program serves to 185% of poverty, right? These are the 2020 guidelines. I can find my salary on here. Can you find yours? And so what I want to point out is that this $30,000, $40,000 for a family of 3, these are professional level wages in Tennessee. This is not somebody in a homeless shelter. These are our neighbors, our friends, the people we go to worship with. These are the people that we go to school with. These are the people that we are around. These are our family. And so when my educators come and say, well, we can't find anybody for this program, I'm like, do you need me to come? Because I qualify, especially any single parent qualifies. And so when we look at that, Tennessee is one of 5 states in the nation that has a federal minimum wage law, because we've never passed a state minimum wage, and it's 7.25. We also lead the nation in percentage of workers who make minimum wage at 11%. So 1 out of every 10 workers is here. So what does that really look like? Well, 30 hours I put here because a lot of workers who make minimum wage only get 30 hours, so they don't get benefits. But if they got 40, they would still make half the poverty line for a family of 2. So if we doubled Tennessee's minimum wage to $15 an hour, they would make $30,000 a year and still be within the guidelines for my program for a family of 2. So what does that mean if the average rent is $1,400, which is totally Nashville? And then childcare in Tennessee 2020 is $8,700 a year. And then what about utilities, food, health care, transportation? I drive 2 hours to work to Nashville every time I go to campus. So 4 hours a day in the car so I can afford a home. and I work for Tennessee State University. And so I know what it's like to try to make the ends meet and try and it's not just living in a food desert, in an urban area, like the gentleman was saying. However, where I go and drive home to is a food desert, and we have to go into Alabama to go to a grocery store. And so that's something to keep in mind. So what about emergencies and having savings? Where are we with that? So it's about heart. All of this is really about people. It's not about statistics. It's about our friends, our neighbors, it's us. And so when I think about the heart of Extension, I say we go to the people. Extension certainly does, and we live with them and we learn from them. We love them and we start with what they know and we build with what they have. But the best of the leaders, when the work is done and the task is accomplished, the people will say, we've done this ourselves. And that's what Extension's about, and that's why it's a well-kept secret, because if we're doing our job right, it was really the community that did it and not us. And then sometimes we get a really big raise and we get something like this, which has a Tennessee State University shirt, if you look. And this is an educator who's made a difference in this child's life. And that's what our program's about. So thank you for letting me share that with you today.
Thank you so much, Shae. At the intersection of racial injustice and food deserts, we have folks like Nella Frierson, who have founded community gardens. Ms. Pearl founded Brooklet Heights Community Gardens, and she and two of their board members, Marie Campbell and Anna Carella, are joining us here tonight, and they're going to tell us about how community gardens affect justice. But before I let them take over, I want to remind everybody, if you haven't already put the topic that you want to do during this small group in the chat, please do that. Go ahead, guys.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. To be totally honest, I never knew that doing this community garden was political. I've done gardening. My grandparents had a farm. I lived with my parents. We was on a farm. And then when we lived in JC, myself and my 5 daughters, we had buckets that we grew food because we were strict vegetarians. My daughters were allergic to the dye in foods. I said, no problem. We just grew our own. And I didn't know that was a political move. I just was doing what was necessary. And we was, of course, in a food desert, as Dr. Davis said. But I didn't think about that. By any means necessary, I was going to feed my family. So we would get on the bus and make it a whole trip. I would have a daughter strapped to the front, to the back, and we would just go on the bus and we'll stay all day long. And then different people knew our routes and our what we was doing. They said, can we go? Yes. So we made it a whole journey to how to eat better, just how to be outside, how to be alive. So when I started, I moved into over here, Scruggs, Brooklyn Heights, off of West Trench Lane, a food desert again, which I didn't know anything about, none of that. And I noticed all the people would stay in the house because when we came from JC Napier, we stayed outside. We partied, we played, we laughed, we ran. Obesity was out of the question, which one of my daughters was overweight. She was sneaking to other people's houses and eating food that I wasn't giving her. She confessed after she turned about 40, which is, oh well. So, but with the community garden, we was used to being outside. So I was like, well, what can I do? So I kept thinking about it. I didn't know about no gardening. And then all the people was coming to our house, and I didn't want to just have fun and just to play. I wanted to be meaningful, that when I passed, they'll still have something that they're doing that was glorifying, that was uplifting, that was helping them to become a community. Because over here, nobody, after 6, 7 o'clock, nobody was outside. I didn't understand that. Anyway, so long story short, one of the young men who came was with my daughters. He got murdered. And that, I became frozen and I didn't know what to do. And I said, I got to do something. And that's when it kept coming to me to do this community garden. And see, this community garden is not just a garden. It's the hub of the neighborhood. I've been doing this over 12, 13 years. And every year I'm gonna give up, but every year I don't. I'm compelled beyond myself to eat better, to interact with the neighbors, to a lot of gentrification is going on over here. And I make it a point that when the neighbors come by with their big fluffy dogs or little skinny dogs, I make it a point that they stop at the garden. And a lot of times, first they was like, "Who is that?" So sometimes I'll be waving around, "Come on over here," and then they kind of look. So I put your mask on. Then they become my friends now. And so we all got to do our little bit of part. And it's out. And the way I acquired the land, because I never have had just a career. Well, yes, I have. But I've always done side jobs. I could travel the world. I would sell shoes in order to buy the land. And then I would have, pardon me, fish fries. I would babysit the whole neighborhood. I would do whatever I could to buy the land. I bought 2 plots. I bought a house across the street and the house I live in, because my goal is that I'm going to teach myself how to have this community garden, then teach another self how to do it. Then for generations to come, we're all going to get back to community, because it's highly unlikely you will rob me if we don't plant it all day long tomatoes or pull weeds. We are human. We have become a part of each other. And even I'm gonna let Marie and Anna chime in with some more good stuff. But one thing has happened, some of the men in the neighborhood who was on drugs or alcoholics, I told them, "You're doing a good job." They was messing stuff up. But I just kept saying, "You're doing a good job. Keep at it. Look at you." That's Miss Pearl. I said, "Jump on the bike." And they couldn't really ride fast as I could. They was half my age. But I was determined that they was gonna mean something to themselves. And I did need them to pull those weeds, but not the plants. They would pull the plants out. But anyway, 2 of them had stopped drinking. So hey, we're all doing our part. Maria, Anna, do either one you want to chime in? Marie?
I'm waiting for Anna to unmute.
Okay.
You
This
go
has been
first.
a journey. This has been a journey, but it's been a good one.
We're here just to be with Miss Pearl on this panel because we're all really close. All 3 of us live in the neighborhood. Anna lives around the corner, and I just moved into Miss Pearl's basement apartment. And woo! And the garden, like Miss Pearl said, is right across the street. So there are 3 lots that Miss Pearl owns in addition to her own home. And what that has meant for the neighborhood is that there's this almost a whole block that can't be developed because Miss Pearl owns the land and she won't sell it, despite how nasty developers are when they contact her trying to get her to sell. And so gentrification is slowly creeping in over here, but there's this stronghold on the block where we're growing food. And meeting people and talking about what an elderberry is, and talking about what is that big sage bush over there, what do you do with it? And so we have Brooklyn Heights Community Garden is a 501c3, and there's a board that Anna and I are part of with a couple of other really amazing people. And we've been putting together with Miss Pearl. So Anna, Miss Pearl, and I did a permaculture design training together in January. We went out to California and we learned about permaculture design from a woman named Starhawk. And we were out there for almost 3 weeks. And while we were there in January, we were talking about Brooklyn Heights Community Garden a lot. And we were talking about, how can we pull behind Miss Pearl's dreams and build from what she's already created. And so we're going to do a whole revamping of the garden with the help of some of our really good friends, Nashville Foodscapes.
Yes.
And I'm an employee of, but we've been helping with design, and I'm going to help with recreating some of the raised beds and planting a bunch of perennials to help with pollinators and a lot of stuff like that. And then Anna, do you want to talk about the residential gardens part and the kind of the neighborhood part of it?
Sure. I think our vision for the garden is that it's not just like a place where people come and look at plants or like come and pick up a few vegetables or whatever, that it's like not just like a novelty in the garden, because, well, one, because a single garden can't produce enough food for a whole neighborhood. And two, because in a neighborhood that's gentrifying, a garden like that can just act as an accelerator of gentrification, because then it becomes like a touch point, like, oh, look at this beautiful garden. And then white people want to move, bougie people want to move, whatever. So I think like our vision is that we like marry, like help, like doing gardens in people's yards and teaching people how to, like, offering to plant the gardens and offering to help, grow the veggie starts in a greenhouse at the community garden. So it's like, it's not producing necessarily food, it is also producing food, but it's also producing plants for the neighborhood that we can plant in people's yards so that everyone becomes a food producer. And then it's like a force multiplier. And that we include anti-gentrification and resistance efforts too, because like, I mean, for the reasons that I said, basically, like, we don't want to be a gentrifier accelerator. And so the idea, I think that, and a lot of that came out of our permaculture thinking and like thinking about edible landscaping and stuff. It's like, well, we don't have that much land in an urban area, but yeah, we do. Like my lot across from Miss Pearl's, or around the corner, is like 1/3 of an acre, which a lot of it's sunny. And a lot of my neighbors have a lot of space like that too. So, and I think, gardening is a lot of work. I like it. Well, I don't do it for a full-time job, but not yet. But, I think it becomes easier when you do it in groups, and that, like, that idea that it becomes a neighborhood project, like we work on so-and-so's yard today, then on Saturday, and then we work on so-and-so else's yard another day, and we all kind of come together and become like a hub. I think an actual community, like that's the vision anyway, and using the garden as a hub for that. So like having market days. Well, I grew a bunch of zucchini and I got too many, but I don't have any cucumbers, so I want to get some from my neighbors and trade off and whatever, because this idea of like begging capitalist profit-seeking grocery stores to like build brick and mortar in poor neighborhoods is never going to work. And then the like donating charitable stuff is also just it's not food independence or sustainability. It's like, it's just charity handouts. So I mean, not that it's helpful, obviously, like needed. I don't mean to like poo-poo it completely or anything, but it doesn't actually transform like power relations or self-determination. And so I think our vision is that that we can like do something around that to like help people grow their own food and have fun doing it. So.
And another thing also to chime in is that we have partnered with the school up the street, Haynes Middle School, and we have partnered with was it ABC College, and with the church that's on the corner. So all this was before the pandemic. So right now we're trying to figure all that out. But still, the partnership, we're still negotiating and talking about it, because ABC College has a lot of land up there that's just lying there waiting for somebody to plant some stuff pretty soon.
Okay.
And do y'all want to close up?
Well, we have one more speaker and we're about 10 minutes behind where I wanted to be already. So if you don't mind, thank you so much. Another one of the possible solutions is for businesses to do what they can and are willing to do. Everett Davis, our last but not least speaker, is the sustainability coordinator at the Music City Center. So from food sharing to raising bees, the Music City Center has been leading the way in being good environmental stewards and good neighbors. Everett?
Yeah, and I'll try to condense so we can maybe catch up on some time. No, thanks for having us. Appreciate it. Happy to be a part of this. I want to say that I think that's very fitting that I'm going last, because effectively my job is was born out of a active system, and that system being everything we're talking about tonight, which is food justice and our food system. There's a lot of aspects to my job, but one of the main ones is managing the waste streams of Music City Center, and a big part of that is food. We have events that range from a couple dozen people to 60,000 people, and each event, it depends on the needs, but they could have a coffee bar for 20,000 people, or they could have a full plated 3-course dinner for 3,000 people. It runs the gamut. But at the end of the day, a lot of my job is figuring out how can I increase the waste diversion percentage of our whole building. And a large part of that is obviously food. So I just wanted to kind of preface that, where I think that, you know, we're thinking of this whole thing as a system, and me going last is a good bookend, because I'm kind of catching things that are I guess you could say, falling through the cracks. Where the food is going in large corporate scenarios and situations. So just a brief history of how my job came to be, because it is kind of interesting. Music City Center obviously was built about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was LEED Gold certified because of Carl F. Dean, the mayor. Back then, he had a mandate that all metro buildings need to be LEED Silver. And if you're not aware, this is a USGBC, which is US Green Building Council standard of green buildings. And it works on energy, water, waste. Waste is part in there, building materials. It runs the gamut. But effectively, they needed a sustainability coordinator to manage a lot of these systems. So that's how my position was born. I'm the third sustainability coordinator that has been there since they have opened. And it's a constant battle to increase numbers. And increasing numbers is increasing the percentage of waste diversion, increasing the amount of DBE businesses that we work with. I work with the director of purchasing on that. DBE stands for Diverse Business Enterprise. So a percentage of all products that we buy for the Music City Center need to be DBE, and a percentage of actual events during the year need to be DBE focused. So I know I'm kind of saying kind of all over the gamut here, but kind of when it relates to food, so there's multiple, you got to understand with Music City Center, we're such a large place, we're 6 city square blocks, and we've got multiple, I guess you could say, parties, stakeholders working to just put on one event. So just for one event, I mean, we've got the building staff, we've got the F&B staff, we've got the client who's putting on the event, we've got the attendees who are going to the event, we've got third-party decorators that are decorating the event, and they also manage a waste stream along with the food and beverage team and the building staff. So there's a lot of this going on for just one event, and it's all unique and specific. So part of it is trying to figure out, how can we measure this? How can we create a system that's going to save food? And my solution has been thinking about the food waste hierarchy, where obviously the very bottom of that is you're throwing away food, and we all want to prevent that. And then the top of the top of the waste hierarchy would be that there is no waste, and everybody has equitable opportunity to healthy eating food. And so it depends. Of course, I don't have the needle in one place right now. It's not like I'm only stuck on one thing. There's multiple sources happening every single day. And so I've kind of got a bunch of irons in the fire. Overall, I'll say that my big goal right now is to slowly push that needle towards composting, because it's a lot easier to move up the hierarchy one step at a time, rather than to say, we're just not going to do trash at all. And we're going to donate everything. And also with donations, there's a health and safety aspect of that. And you have to be compliant with liable. That's the word I was looking for. They don't want to be liable for anything that could potentially happen to who's receiving the donations. So there's a lot of things that can't be donated. And in that case, they need to be composted. So it's a big, complicated machine that cranks out a lot of waste, and it's just figuring out where we can be proactive and getting the food to people who need it. We work a lot with Nashville Rescue Mission. That's the main source of where we donate our food. Honestly, it's really also because they're right across the street from Music City Center. So it's super easy to have that waste stream go there, and we know it's going to get used. And then, even we've donated to a small organization called Walden's Puddle, which takes Tennessee wildlife who need to be rehabilitated and rehabilitates them. So I've donated, 100 pounds of lettuce to them before, and they use that for rehabilitating raccoons, things like that. So it's across the gamut. It is a large issue with multiple solutions that I constantly am working on to work smoothly together. There's probably a lot more that I could say. Oh, I'll hit you with one more thing. The total donations, I wrote this down. So for last year, which would have been the 2019 to 2020 year, that's on a financial calendar, we donated 27,395 pounds of food, which I know is a hard number to conceive. And then 65,648 pounds of that food was composted. And part of my big push starting in the year 2020, back in January, is that we're trying to collect more food, not just outside of the kitchen and the meal areas, but food in the big exhibit hall area. And it's hard to know if you haven't seen the building, but there's waste and food going in and out of multiple areas. And generally, we've been only collecting donations and food out of the kitchen, which is the grand ballroom area. But I'm looking to expand that across facility wide. And that takes a lot of logistics, which of course COVID has really thrown a wrench in a lot of those plans, but hopefully we'll get back to it soon. Again, I'm sure there's more that I could say, but maybe that's probably what the breakout room is for. So hopefully I gave a good overview.
Thank you, Everett. And that takes us to, we're going to take a 3-minute break real quick, let everybody stretch their legs and use the restroom or whatever else they need to do, refill their drinks, and then we're going to come back and split you up into small groups.
I just want to chime in and say there's still a handful of people who have not selected a breakout room. So to do that, please just write which one you want to do in the chat box. And again, the options are community gardens, food justice as race justice, SNAP, food deserts, and how businesses can help. Okay, thanks.
These are the questions we're going to discuss in the small groups, and I'm going to paste this in the chat. And then Natalie and I are going to learn our knowledge that we just tried this small group thing out today. So wish us luck. And we're going to put you in the small groups and start that up. So thank you for your patience. Welcome back. We'll give a few seconds for everybody to shift back in. We want to give each group about a minute and not more because we're so tight on time, but each group get about 1 minute to say anything that they found that was important or that they really need to share. And then we'll give each of the panelists 1 minute to sum up, and then we will thank everybody for being here. So let's see. Who should I call on first? Let's do community gardens. You guys want to go first? You're closest to my eyeball, so sorry.
Do anybody want to say something about what you talked about? What you learned?
Why don't you just recap?
You recap.
You recap.
Okay.
I feel like I would have to be a much more fun person to work and run a community garden. Like, your personality, Pearl, is so like, wow. I wish I could be like, no, that's not me.
Well, I can help you.
Go buy a hula hoop.
Come with us.
What I'm in touch with is my inner child. It took her a long time to come out, but she stays out sometime more than she need to.
Well, that's what we talked about. We talked about what's the secret to keeping community gardens alive and not just the pet project of one person who thought it was a good idea to start it and then moved away or got burned out or whatever. And we talked about, yeah, having fun and doing it as a team and how important it is to build relationships that build collaborative leadership and intergenerational, where it can be, you know, the learning can be transitioned. And so it's not one person's responsibility, but it's a whole group of people.
All right. Food justice, racial justice. Anybody from Dr. Padgett's group want to say a few words?
Yeah, I'll report out very quickly. I guess we didn't come up with any solutions, you know, racial justice, but we did look at, or it was mentioned that the issues of affordability in general, the wage gap, the wealth gap that results in low wages, low income is somewhat rooted in racial injustice, historical racial injustice and inequality in this country. And then we kind of got into a discourse / rant on my part about the implications of the election. And, my thought that, well, if it's a landslide, then surely this is, America's speaking up and saying enough is enough is enough. But America spoke up and said, a lot of America said, we want more white supremacy. It came that close to getting 4 more years of whatever this was that happened for the last 4 years, which, again, if that attitude is just so pervasive, then no wonder we see what we see in terms of disparities. But in the chat, I put a link to a really good documentary, a new documentary called After Selma, that discusses the attacks on the Voting Rights Act, and it's just amazing. If you watch that documentary, it's eye-opening. It'll definitely let you know that we are not in a post-racial anything, never were, not even close to it. Once you see that documentary.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for posting that. The SNAP group. Anybody from Shae's group want to?
We talked a little bit. They had questions about the program and kind of how to partner and what we do in the community. So that was pretty much what we talked about.
Oh, Dr. Schlundt.
Yeah, our discussion of how grocery stores decide where to place themselves for profit led to a little bit larger discussion of how the sort of corporate industrial food system is literally killing us for profit. And that part of what we need to address if we want food justice, food equity, is find ways to pull back from the cheap, fast, convenient, unbelievably delicious food that's being offered up all around us all of the time. And so we talked a little bit about gardens and CSAs and other ways that we might bring ourselves back a little bit closer to the source of our foods.
Thank you. And Everett's group?
Yeah, we talked about a lot of things, and I think that the main theme was trying to monetize or measure wage disparity and the difference that we have, the divide, and redistribution of wealth, and why that's how even if your bottom line is simply financial, how that can benefit on a large system scale. So we talked about that, and it was a good conversation. So
great. And I was gonna ask each panelist to say a few closing words, but it seems like everybody kind of just did that with their group. Do you have anything else you want to add about along those lines?
I'll just say that, we are all sustainability warriors, and and as a sustainability professional, I think that we all are recognizing that each of these issues are greatly intertwined. In my job, I don't just focus on food waste, but food waste affects every issue. So just know that you're helping other issues if you're working on one. So
yeah, they're definitely all very intertwined.
And what I want to say is that I'm consciously stepping out of my comfort zone, learning about the political side of this arena. And I want other people to tap into their inner child, or just show up at Brooklyn Heights Community Garden. We're on Facebook. Let's make this thing happen, and let's have a bunch of fun. I'm getting ready to be 65, and we're going to bring this new year in right. You hear me, David? Both Davids.
Y'all put your contact information in the chat so that everybody has it.
Oh yeah, this is off topic, but kind of sort of on topic.
Okay.
That as per what they do, they asked me to write a book, so I put all my thoughts in a book.
Good. Good. That's exciting.
You put the information on there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But
Are you putting the website to the garden?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay, good.
Right. And any other resources that you feel like would be especially helpful to this conversation?
Everybody else do the same, please. I'm
Yep.
gonna contact you. Hey, will all that stuff be here? What? How you gonna get out there?
All right. Let me see what else we have.
Will that contact us?
Did that. All right. So I wanted to tell you about our book club. Society of St. Andrew and the Local Food Summit and Slow Food Middle Tennessee are hosting this book club. We have 35 people already that are involved. We finished Freedom Farmers, which is an amazing book about, I can't even, a lot of things about food sovereignty and race and history of civil rights in food and all kinds of good stuff. This one is One Size Fits None, which is more about regenerative agriculture, and that will be interesting in a whole different kind of way. It's more about the environmental piece of it and how each farm or garden or whatever it is has their own journey to figure this out. I think it's a little more of a memoir flavor for any of you that were a little not happy with the kind of academic flavor that the other one had. And then this is my contact information. If you have any questions for me about how to get in touch with anyone here tonight, or if you want to hear about the Society of St. Andrew or join the book club or any of those kinds of things, this is the contact information for that. Any other questions or comments, Natalie?
Yeah, we have a few minutes. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to pose? I mean, just maybe just take one or two questions if there's any out there. You could type them in the chat, or you could unmute yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Lauren Bailey. I think my question is just like, what's the next step of this conversation? Like, how do we continue building community around this conversation towards food justice?
I can respond, but if anyone else has a response, feel free. But my thought is something that really was already apparent, but became, even more apparent during this conversation, was just that there are many nuanced aspects of justice within our food system, and way too much to talk about really in one session. And I think that it would be beneficial maybe to have sessions that were specific, like we had the breakout rooms, but that were specifically, focusing on one of those topics. And one hope for the Food Summit in 2021 is that we could do monthly webinars like this, or more. I mean, we're just like a volunteer-run organization, but the more people that we have involved and that are interested in helping host these kind of events, or submitting topics or subjects that are maybe more pinpointed than what we just did tonight, that was sort of like a very general overview, I think would be a good next step. That's more on the educational side in terms of like boots on the ground, practical things. Maybe someone else has another idea.
I'll just also say, this is Ursula King. Natalie and I were honored to be able to work with Vanderbilt University through the Wandry in a student project. And it was a human-centered design project where students interviewed some members that help run and coordinate the Tennessee Local Food Summit. And we just had a presentation on Tuesday of a piece of technology they can build for us. And so they are helping us build technology for the website that will allow people who attend things to access each other. So we understand the breakout from last year's Food Summit, that people really do want to be active. And we're working on technological solutions that may help with that, with the help of Vanderbilt University and the Social Innovation Center at the Wandry. So we were lucky enough to be able to participate in that this year, and it will be a full year-long project. And the spring semester will be when they actually start coding and building, because now it's designed, designed to the point where it can be designed on paper. So that is one thing that we're working on at the Food Summit.
I'd like to, this is Carol Taylor, I'll just chime in and say this kind of broad aspects where we saw a lot of different things was really actually very helpful, so that you don't forget about other opportunities. Say you meet somebody and their interests are a little different. Well, you can maybe dig in with these folks. So I understand we really want to get boots on the ground practical, but I did really appreciate hearing this span of issues. And we can't forget the range of issues and get to thinking, this is the only thing we have to do. Everybody has to do this, So I think that would be great if we keep something like this, and then more details in another session or other sessions.
I'd also like to say just one thing. I really appreciate Dr. Padgett's historical overview, because it's really easy to think, well, that, we're the latest thing and nobody's ever done anything like this before. And anyway, I really, that was really important for me. Thanks, Dr. Padgett.
Hi, this is Vanessa. And in my point of view, a big way for transformation is to start building bridges and get into communities directly, make friends with people that is diverse. Don't be afraid of befriending a person that doesn't look like you. Have conversations with, learn Spanish, learn how to dance and go into a different neighborhood. Just bring diversity into each other's lives. And I think that is going to be a way to tackle this issue, because at the end of the day, we're all humans. And if we don't have the relationship part, we're not gonna do it. So yes, make a friend that looks different than you, or that's coming from a different place.
Yeah, there are tons of community organizations that are already working together in different facets of this. as Shae mentioned, there's the TSU extensions that are all over the place that are doing all kinds of different parts of this. There are environmental groups that are already working towards some of these things. And there are tons and tons, of course, of food banks and food pantries and all that kind of stuff. So if it's a matter of finding a place to get plugged in, I'm happy to try and help you or anyone with that if you want to reach out to me. Whatever you want to learn more about, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm going to put my email address in the chat again. Any other questions?
Thank you all very much for this.
All right. Thank you everyone for your attendance and your participation. Thanks so much to the panelists. I know this was a long session, but I'm really grateful that everyone was able to participate tonight. The next session is going to be next Thursday. It'll just be 1 hour and it'll be on cooperatives. And the title of that is, one moment, Cooperatives, Fostering Democracy and Equity in Our Food Systems. And I think it's going to be really interesting, just alternative ways that we could come together to build a more equitable food system.
It addresses some of the questions that came up earlier tonight in some of the conversations. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely relevant to what we talked about today. Anyway, thank you all so much.
Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you, Natalie.